There have been a lot of Chicago Bulls fans that have been asking about what are realistic expectations for the Bulls in 2026-27. And while it's easy as fans to get caught up in the new direction, new coach, new players, all the promise that this Bulls team has, on today's episode, I want to have a realistic conversation about what 2026-27 could look like for the Chicago Bulls with three possible different outcomes to the season. The best outcome, the most realistic outcome, and what could happen if everything falls apart. So we're going to look at that. Plus, we're going to look at Matas Buzelis and what a realistic third-year leap would look like for him. We're going to compare what his expectations are in year three to year three leaps from Pascal Siakam, Jalen Williams, and Jalen Johnson. So we're going to talk about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content for today, y'all. So, the expectations for the Bulls in 2026-27. You know, a lot of you guys have different thought processes on it. You have some guys that are really excited that are saying that the Bulls can compete for the play-in. You have some Bulls fans that are more pessimistic and say, hey, we're going to be one of the bottom five teams in the Eastern Conference. Some even think one of the bottom three teams in the league. Some people are worried about being in the relegation zone, right? And I think that, you know, one thing that you want to do is like have a holistic view of everything going on in the Eastern Conference. And you want to really look at what it takes to get to certain places. So what I've done with this is I've come up with three different scenarios for the Chicago Bulls possibly in the 2026-27 season. And I think this is reasonable. Again, based off what we know right now. This could change again as we see the team play during the season. And like I've said many times before, is I really do think this team is going to, it could be a rough first 20-ish games for this team as they learn to play with each other, learn the new system under Tiago Splitter. There's a lot of change with this team and also how to overcome the lack of shooting as well, right? So I think with this one, right, you have I think the most likely outcome for the Bulls is to be on the play-in bubble. I'll just say that right away, right? Where it's like Bulls are going to play exciting, they're going to play faster, they're going to be more athletic, all those type of things, but we're still a very young team, and so we can ride up on the bubble there. So and we'll get into more details on this, but the high end of the Bulls, I say 42 wins as the high end for the Chicago Bulls, right? Which puts you at about an 8th to 9th finish in there, and that's if the Bulls arrive early. You know, a couple of things would have to happen in that. We'll explain that. The most realistic range for the Bulls, I think, is between 35 and 39 wins, which would have you finish probably between 9th and 11th in the Eastern Conference. That has you in the play-in race, and it means that your growth has kind of gone and ebbed and flowed as the season went on. And then the worst case scenario for the Chicago Bulls have 27 to 32 wins, which puts you 12th to 14th. And that would happen if you have, like, because of the youth, fit issues, those type of things that show up. So let's talk about the most realistic outcome first. I think that's a good place to start. 35 to 39 wins is a realistic area for the Bulls, and that puts you in the play-in bubble, right? This is where land is the most realistic place for the Bulls to be. I think when you look at the things that would have to happen with this one, right, is that A, of course, Giddey continues to put up very strong numbers and runs the offense and those type of things. Norman Powell stabilizes the offense the way that the Bulls hope he's going to with the scoring ability and the shooting, and it really helps that starting lineup. And then you have the Nic Claxton defense. If Nic Claxton gets back to the defensive player of the year, even close to, right? Not quite that level, but he does, like, his switch ability, his weak side defense, the lob threat, all that shows up. And then you're looking at Matas and Caleb really flashing real upside, even though their efficiency may swing and ebb and flow over the course of the season. And then you also have strong bench play, right? Especially from Dailyn Swain. When you look at his defensive minutes, the offensive minutes, I think that Dailyn Swain over the course of this season is really going to emerge as a scoring threat off the bench for the Chicago Bulls. Much like Io, right? Like I look at Dailyn Swain and Io's trajectory to be very similar, right? In the sense that you know, Io was a scorer in college. Dailyn Swain was one of the best isolation scorers in college. They both have really good defense, right? And I think that when you look at Io, especially how he made an impact for the Bulls initially, his first impact was defensive, and then you started seeing him get more offensively. And I think you could see that in a kind of a microcosm within one season for Dailyn Swain a lot because we don't have any bench scoring on this team, right? And so that feels like a team that can battle for the 9th, the 10th seed, maybe the play-in if the matchup's right for that team. But I think you're looking at those things to make really step that team forward if you do that. Tiago Splitter would also have to really, kind of understand how to utilize these guys kind of earlier on if that happens, right? But then let's flip this and look at the high-end outcome. Now, I want to be clear here. What I'm saying is a high-end outcome, I'm not saying is a likely outcome. I'm saying that this is if everything breaks right for the Chicago Bulls, 42 to 46 wins. Right now, that is a huge, I think if the Bulls have an above 500 season in the first year of a rebuild, the first year of a new head coach, the first year of this front office, that is great. This would happen if so much for the Chicago Bulls is ahead of the schedule, right? We would have to be looked at as a ahead of the schedule team, right? I think the thing that you want to compare this to is the 2023, the 2024 Rockets, who jumped to 41-41 in Ime Udoka's first year there. And you look at how he gave that young roster defensive structure. They had veteran guard play, and they had real accountability. And Houston still missed the playoffs with that. So I want to keep that in mind. Now, but it did immediately change their identity, and it really marked them becoming a serious team again. Now, this would happen, I think, if you look at the Chicago Bulls, like I said, if everything holds right. Josh Giddey shooting, the 36 to 38% from three-point range happens, so where teams have to guard him consistently at the three-point line. Matas Buzelis becomes a real, it looks at as a 2 or 3 option on a winning team, right? 15 to 17 points per game, improved defense, right? The weak side rim protection that he brings, the ceiling jump would have to be there. Then also Caleb Wilson would have to be productive immediately. And I don't just mean defensively, I mean offensively, right? I think if you look at Caleb Wilson, if he averages between 15 and 16 points per game as a rookie with 7 rebounds, the transition scoring becomes an absolute weapon for him as the Chicago Bulls push that pace as well. And we have enough shooting from like Norman Powell to be able to balance that. I think also this is where Nic Claxton would have to become not just a good defensive switchable big, but the defensive anchor it looked like he was becoming 2 or 3 years ago. He would have to get back to that and be that anchor. And I think that Nic Claxton, too, has a really good path to overachieving. Again, there's things that need to happen and markers that would need to be hit there. But if Nic Claxton's rim protection, his ability to run in transition, his switch ability to go along with Caleb Wilson, and Matas' switch ability becomes all really good, the Bulls would have to be a defensive stalwart of a team when you look at Claxton, Matas, Caleb, Swain, right? Even I would say some of Isaac Okoro and Leonard Miller, these guys would all have to help this Bulls team form this defensive identity that you look at and you say, hey, listen, offensively, we may be a little bit inconsistent, but defensively, day in and day out, the Chicago Bulls are one of the top 12 defenses in the league if you get there. And this also comes down a lot to Tiago Splitter. If he gets the buy-in early from the players in this, right, whereas Tiago in his development, like as we saw kind of the way that development rolls with the Portland Trailblazers, that's how you can get this. Keep in mind, he led to the Portland to a 42-40 record in the West, right? So Tiago Splitter's coaching would have to matter so much in regards to that one that it's just elite, right? And then at the same time, you guys know, we also have to talk about the worst possible outcome because I'm not just going to be a front runner. I know some people get mad when I talk about bad things with the Chicago Bulls, like, oh my God, why are you being negative? And it's like, I know, I'm being realistic. I do think as well that there's a chance that the Bulls are 27 to 32 win team. And this is the worst case outcome, right? And that's when you are truly in a development year, right? And it's not hard to see this possibly happening for the Bulls. I'm not saying that it's likely. So anything that I say here, keep in mind, for those who are triggered, a little bit weaker of mind, I'm not saying that this is likely, but we're not going to act like this isn't a possibility of what could happen here, right? Let's say that Josh Giddey's three-point shot isn't legitimate, and he falls back down to earth with that three-point shot with what he was before. Nic Claxton is a player that does not get back to that defensive player that he looked like before. And then let's say as well that Caleb Wilson and Matas Buzelis look talented, but are either inefficient or just have up and down years under a new coach and a new system. And of course, as well, Norman Powell's scoring, especially late in game, doesn't quite take effect like the Chicago Bulls would want it to, right? And I think that this could also happen is that if Tiago Splitter spends a half the season experimenting with lineups to find the right kind of matchups and the right guys, which means that you're going through some lineups that aren't necessarily the most effective for a while there, it could be there. Now, this could mean that the Bulls aren't necessarily terrible. Maybe they're competitive but inconsistent, which is something that we have seen from young teams before. And those are teams that lose a lot in the fourth quarter that you look at and you say, hey, we competed in this game, but things fell apart in the fourth quarter because we did not know how to close, which I think is if you're being fair, it's not outside the realm of possibility there either. So I think when you look at that is definitely a possibility from that. This could be like the early Orlando Magic teams with Paolo Banchero. You look at them, they improved from 22 wins to 34 wins in Paolo's rookie year, right? That's what they improved in, but they still missed the playoffs because youth and development do not always translate to immediate winning. And this is where you have to look at the fact that you can develop and you can be making those strides, but it doesn't necessarily turn into wins. So I want to bring all this together, look at the historical comparisons, and I brought these teams up over here, but I want to talk about it here. The 2022-23 Orlando Magic, that was a 34-48 win team. When you look at it, they added Paolo Banchero to a team that already had Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner, right? You added that to it. And so that's when they started flashing some definite upside, but they had trouble winning and closing out games. That's kind of the low end, right, of what you're looking at for the Bulls. The middle tier team of that, the 2023-24 Rockets that went 41-41, a young roster that had a new coach, right, that added that they had veteran stabilizers on that team, and they missed the playoffs. Now, that team also went on a crazy run at the end of the season, which you want more consistency from that, but you have that. And then the high end, the 2019-2020 Oklahoma City Thunder that went 44-28, and that was the team that had that Chris Paul on it, right? That kind of overachieved comparative to what people thought they were going to be coming into the season. But you also had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander really starting to show what he eventually turned into. So that's the kind of different tiers that you're looking at in regards to that one. I think the real overall X factor for the Bulls here this season is, of course, the players, which we talked about, but it really comes down to how good are the Bulls as the season goes on in the half-court offense. The transition offense is probably going to be the easiest thing to really work out for the Chicago Bulls early, right? Having Josh Giddey to organize that transition offense, as well as Trey Jones when Josh Giddey's off, I think the transition offense is something that you can look at to be really good right away. But the defense and half-court offense, those are things, because we're relying on so many young players to help establish an identity defensively for this team. That's where you can run into some of the questions, right? And that's what you have to look at. Again, not to throw shade on any players, but just to say, hey, it's something that could happen in regards to that. So we'll see. I think that the most likely scenarios of the Bulls are between 37 and 45-ish wins. Like 37 and 40-ish wins is probably that. And if they can get to the number 10 seed and get to a play-in appearance in year one, there's a really good sign that we're in the right direction with the right players and that we've made the right necessary steps as this season went on. I think at that point it'd be a very fun season, right? But part of that as well, and part of that I want to dive deeper into on this episode, is Matas Buzelis in a third-year leap, right? Much like I just compared the Chicago Bulls and a possible record to other teams, I'm going to look at Matas Buzelis comparative to other players that have made third-year leaps, right? But I think for this is that Matas is a player that's worth being excited about. And that's what he's shown up until this point, absolutely, right? And for Matas, I think a third-year leap is not about all of a sudden becoming some 25-point-per-game scorer. If he does, great, right? But I don't think you need to do that. He made a very strong year two jump, right? When you look at him, 16 points, 5.8 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.5 blocks while shooting 46% from the field and around the mid-30s from three-point range. That's really solid, right? He showed the flashes of what his ceiling could be. You know, that 32-point career high that he had against the Charlotte Hornets, and then a 41-point career high against Golden State. We've seen the upside that Matas Buzelis has, right? But I think when you look at it, to have a realistic trajectory for Matas Buzelis in year three, between 18 and 20 points per game, between 6 and 7 rebounds, between 2.5 and 3.5 assists per game, and then if he can be between 1.2 and 1.7, hell, if he can get up to 2 blocks per game, it'll be huge, right? And then about 1 steal per game, right? So if you look at that, if he can average 2.5 to 3.5 stocks per game, I think you're in a really good spot with that. And I think for Matas, I want to see him shoot between 36 and 38% from the three-point line, which really opens up the floor a lot for him with his ability to get to the rim and all that type of stuff. The biggest growth areas for Matas Buzelis is this. Stronger three-point value, right? Not just the percentage, but taking that. If you get 5 to 6 three-point attempts per game, stay around that 36 to 38% range, right? Attack closeouts better. This is where it's really huge for Matas Buzelis. When Norman Powell and Josh Giddey are going to be able to kind of manipulate that defense, Matas has to punish those guys. One dribble, get downhill, attack those closeouts. Number 3, be more physical more consistently. That is something that Matas has struggled with at times, is the physicality in the NBA. We've seen it. He's talked about it. I think he would be able to admit that. There are times where he deals with it really, really well, and there's some times where you look at it and you're like, Matas, come on, man, you left that on the court. And then also cleaner and faster decisions. Catch, shoot, catch, drive, catch, swing it out, right? Do more of that. And I think Tiago Splitter's read and react offense, right, is going to get him there because he prioritizes those fast kind of decision makings, especially in the half court. So I think that Tiago Splitter is gonna push him to do that. And if Matas becomes a better decision maker early, I think that's gonna really work. And of course, the defensive consistency. You have to be more consistent defensively. We know that the tools are there. We've seen him. He's had those really good on-ball defensive stats, but you have to be more consistent even in pick-and-roll defense and stuff like that, right? You have to become a nightly threat defensively. Nightly. Every single night, make an impact on the defensive side of the ball. You do that, I think it's really good, right? So when you look at it for a couple of third-year leaps for Matas Buzelis, one of the good comparisons is Franz Wagner, right? When you look at Franz Wagner, he went from 15.2 points per game as a rookie to 18.6 points per game in year 2, and then 19.7 points per game with 5.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists in year 3, right? That's the type of growth path that'll be really good to see Matas Buzelis be on, right? And I do think that's one of the best outcomes for Matas in 2026-27. 19 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, improved defense, better decision-making, and dealing with that physicality better. That'll be a really good third leap. On the high end, though, Pascal Siakam and his third-year jump, when you look at it, he became an absolute two-way force in year 3. He averaged 17 points, 16.9, 6.9 rebounds, 3.1 assists, and he became a key to a championship piece. Now, we know that we're not going to have a championship roster, but he won Most Improved Player of the Year as well that year. Pascal Siakam is a really good blueprint for Matas Buzelis to take that next step in year 3. Then you look at another comparison is Jalen Johnson. I always like to go to Jalen Johnson because he had such a slow start to his career. But then you look at year 3, right? When he really became a full-time starter, he averaged 16 points, 8.7 rebounds, 3.7 assists for Atlanta, and he became that do-it-all forward really for that team. I don't think Matas has to dominate the ball in the way that Jalen Johnson did because we have Josh Giddey here, but I do think becoming a valuable threat on offense, on defense, all that type of stuff, in rebounding, in transition, that's where Matas can really thrive. And then the superstar leap, the very high end of a third-year leap, is Jalen Johnson, right? This is the dream version of Matas Buzelis, right? Jalen Williams. Jalen Williams became an all-star and an all-NBA player in year 3, averaging 21 points, 5.3 rebounds, 5 assists, and he made an all-defensive team. Now, I'm not saying that Matas needs to hit all of that, right? But I do think when you talk about high ends of a third-year leap, that is Matas Buzelis. Now, that will require him to be on ball a little bit more, and I think he's going to be here with this team with having Powell and Josh Giddey there. But I do think you want to see him more pull-up shooting, more live dribbling, passing, becoming a point forward a little bit more for this team more consistently, can really do that. Is it possible long-term? Yes. I don't know if it's possible for Matas in 2026-27, though. But, hey, those are the outlooks for it. I think overall, like I said, a realistic outlook for Matas in year 3, 18.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 blocks per game, and 36 to 38% shooting from 3. I think if Matas Buzelis does that in year 3, you got to see a great leap from Matas Buzelis in that season, and maybe that's my hope. But I want to hear from you guys down below on this one. How do you feel about a third-year leap from Matas Buzelis? Do you think this is reasonable and realistic? Let me know that down below. With that said, we had a little overflow in the voicemail bag. We had a first-time caller, and we had my brother Corn. We're going to go ahead and play those 2 voicemails. This one's from my brother Corn.
What's the good word, King Drip? It's your brother Corn, man. Hope everybody having a happy and safe 4th of July out there, man. Blessings to everybody. Blessings to the whole C-Red Nation. Happy 4th to all of you. Let's get right into it. The Summer League. The Summer League. I know some people, pay good, pay bad. I just watched Darren Peterson go crazy. You know what I'm saying? I just watched him go crazy in the league. I think he just bust 28 on their ass, right? So I'm going to say something, and it's just how I feel right now as a fan and what I feel like my Bulls should do. And now that we have our coach, Master Splitter, doing the coaching, the Summer League, I want us to win the Summer League championship. And I believe we can. I believe we have the best young team in the Summer League. I know it doesn't really mean nothing. I know it's just I feel like it's something that will boost morale up to start us up. You know, like the mid-tournament, like the mid-season tournament and all that, you know. That was telling, right? Because we saw New York win the mid-win tournament, and then they went on and won the championship from bastards. You know I hate the Knicks. Fuck the Knicks. But yeah, man, and that's the reason why, because the Master Splitter is coaching. So it's like, you know, let's see, man. Let's see what this team could do. I can't wait. One guy, this is the odd one, Mr. Atwell. I have my eye on him because we need shooting. I believe that we could develop shooting from within. I don't think we need to go out there and get a shooter. I believe that we got shooters there. We just need to develop them to be better shooters. And Atwell is one of them. So I'm going to keep a close eye on him as I'm there sitting there watching. But yes, I want us to win the Summer League Championship. It's just how I feel right now. I feel like it would be a big thing for us. I feel like it would be a good thing for them kids out there, man. Boost their morale, get them ready for the season and all that. And yeah, man, I'm going to be there cheering, of course, you know. And that's pretty much, man. Tell me what you think about it, King Drip, man. I know it really doesn't matter to a lot of us Bulls fans, but I really do want us to win. All right, King Drip, love you. See Red.
I'm excited for Summer League. I think a lot of Bulls fans are excited for Summer League because, you know, you get to see your players play. I just want to make sure that I put it in realistic fashion. Don't have these very deep takeaways on who these players are, good or bad, from Summer League. Summer League is really to see the skill set of a player, right? It's some of the worst brand of basketball that you're going to watch. So look at it as, hey, this is this player's possible skill set, not necessarily the caliber of player that they're going to be, right? I think that's an important part and a distinction to make in Summer League basketball. And as long as you do that, you can put yourself in a really good, realistic form of mind, and then you can just have fun with it. But it's going to be fun basketball to watch. Noah Essengay, Caleb Wilson, Dailyn Swain is going to be there as well. You know, Toby Awaka, I'm excited to see him too, like to see what he can bring for this team. There's a lot of really exciting players to watch. You mentioned Atwell, Jalen Sellers is another one. So really excited to see what these guys can bring in, what that means for them and their chances to make the roster. All right, let's get into this next voicemail, man. This one's from the 708.
Hey, Haize, Ray here. First time caller, long time listener. Just really thrilled with the way the Bulls are going. Caleb Swain, Essengay, Matas, the trade we made, the signing of Norman Powell. I was wondering if you think that Toby Awaka has got a shot to make the roster, the 15th spot of the roster. He looks pretty good to me. But what I also want to say is, do you think that Bryson brought in Claxton to maybe teach Essengay who to be? Tall, skinny guy. You know, if you could teach him to be tough and put on a few pounds and go from there. And then the ability to flip Claxton, Powell, Sticks, and Trey for future assets seems outstanding if these players develop. But who do you think, if they don't sign a free agent, between Awaka and Jalen Sellers has the best chance to make the team? Thanks.
Toby Awaka is exciting, right? I think he's a solid big, very raw, right? Even though he's physical, he brings those type of things. I don't know if the Bulls are going to make him a permanent roster like the 15-man. And here's why I say that. Why pay a player a guaranteed contract when you can probably keep them on a two-way contract for a year or two and still play them in NBA games? I think they can play, 60, 65-ish games in the regular season. I think they can play on a two-way contract. So I just don't see the Bulls kind of pulling the trigger on converting one of those guys when they don't have to yet and they can still play them in NBA games. Now, as far as Nic Claxton and Noah, I've seen a lot of people try to compare Noah Essengay to Nic Claxton. I think Noah has a lot more of an offensive ceiling. I think he's a better ball handler than Nic Claxton has ever been. I think he gets to the free throw line a lot more. He has the chance of doing that. So offensively, no. Defensively, I can see where some of those comparisons are, but I think offensively, Noah Essengay has so much more of a high ceiling than what Nic Claxton has that I think comparing those guys really isn't a valid comparison, but I understand why people do it, though, and I want to be clear in that. So we'll see what happens there. But that's going to do it for today's episode, man. I want to thank all the callers. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Sound off down in those comment sections. Love hearing from you guys and how you feel about all of this. What do you feel about the Bulls and their chances and the outcome and record for next year? Matas Buzelis' third-year leap. Let me know all that down below. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, as I said before. You can follow us at Bull Central Pod on every social media platform. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation